Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Michael. Those were wonderful, rather different introductions. I'm very delighted. I'm very honoured. I'm very grateful to Birmingham. I'm grateful to the Shakespeare Institute for employing me. I'm just going to give a couple of bits of context before I start my talk proper. One bit of context is that this is going to be a two-handed talk, and that I'm very pleased to be celebrating a student of the Shakespeare Institute, Jen Waghorn, here. She is going to be my singer. Jen has had a rather spectacular couple of months herself, during which she successfully defended her doctoral viva and also got married. Little did she think she would top it all today. And another bit of context, which will come to be useful later on in the talk, is that today is the birthday of my mother-in-law, Ali Grimley. Please remember this, it will come to be very relevant soon. So my talk is on plays and ballads of the early modern period. And just to set up the context, I'm going to begin with this very first slide, which is by someone who hates both plays and ballads equally. And Quarles says, "Our merry ballads and lascivious plays are much alike. The one sings, the other says, and both are fripperies of another's froth." Now, this is saying that they are both completely superficial and pointless, but it is also interestingly saying that they're so closely related that one kind of brings about the other. The one is an off-product of the other. And that's really what this talk is going to be about. The talk will have three bits. I'm going to look at Ben Jonson and plays and ballads. Then I'm going to look at Shakespeare and plays and ballads. And then I'm going to look at the theatre itself and plays and ballads. The first part, the Ben Jonson part, will be the longest. So don't despair. It gets shorter and shorter as it goes on. Just to give some context, I need to explain what it is that I mean when I'm talking about ballads. I don't just mean songs. I mean a piece of paper that looks like this. This is what you would buy if you bought a ballad. And I'm just going to talk through its features. The ballad is maybe the size, a bit bigger than an A4 piece of paper now. It starts with its title at the top, and you can see here that this particular ballad, and they're on all kinds of things, tragedies and comedies and jokes and advice and pornography and all kinds of things. This particular ballad is a caveat for cut purses. So a caveat, this is a warning for cut purses, and it's both a warning about you because your purse might be cut, and it's also a warning for cut purses not to do their terrible trade. And just to explain cut purses and their trade, in this period you tended to have a belt, which I wish I'd remembered to wear today so that I could have hung this sound system in it, but you tended to have a belt, and on it would hang your purse. So a cut purse is simply someone who snips it off and runs away. So this is a warning about cut purses. You'll see that under that big title, it says in small writing, "to the tune of Packington's pound." And this is a thing about ballads, is they don't supply their music. And they don't supply their music partly because musical type was very expensive and only one printer was allowed to use it. But they also don't supply their music because the kind of person who buys a ballad might but might not be able to read music. So instead, a ballad was set to a tune you already knew. So when you bought a ballad, you'd buy a new text to a known tune. And one of the things that might draw you to a ballad is that you already like that tune. So it's a slightly different sense of music from ours. Then you'll see that this ballad has 4 pictures on it. And one thing that made people love ballads was their pictures. So they loved singing them, they loved performing them, but they also liked having the pictures and hanging them on their walls. So ballads were also homely decorations. And if I can just, I'll just show you a verse just to give you a sense of the way it looks. So I've just blown up one of the verses there. You can see ballads tend to be in that Gothic lettering, in black letter. And to us that can look complicated, but in fact black letter was how you learned to read. So ballads looked almost maybe a little childish, very accessible. But you can also see that there's a bit at the bottom here which is not in black letter. That's the chorus. And people loved ballads with the chorus. They didn't always have one, but if they did have a chorus, that allows you, the listener, to join in and become part of that ballad. And even if you are illiterate, you can join in the ballad. And I'll just read a tiny bit of this ballad, this warning for cut purses. My masters and friends and good people draw near, and look to your purses. For that I do say, and though little money in them you do bear, it costs more to get than to lose in a day. So this is to you. And then the bit at the bottom, I'll just do the last two lines. We've changed, we're now talking to the wicked cut purse. Youth, youth, thou hadst better been starved by thy nurse than lived to be hanged for cutting a purse. Okay, so this is the warning ballad. And just to show you what I was saying about the different ways in which people might appreciate ballads, here we are in a tavern. And you can see that there are two men who are singing from a ballad. So one reason you might want a ballad is it's a kind of instant party if you like singing. You can see a third man is joining in the chorus, although he's not looking at the ballad. So that's the singing aspect of the ballad. Then you can see the lonely, thoughtful man at the front. And he is sitting by a wall that is casually decorated with a ballad. Pubs were filled with ballads, which served the purpose. You could both sing from them and they'd be decorations. Same with your house, same with your milking shed. You tended to put ballads in your milking shed because that might help you set up a good rhythm when you milk your cows. Let us now turn actually to Ben Jonson, the playwright. Ben Jonson writes a play called Bartholomew Fair. And in this play of Bartholomew Fair, there is a wicked but charismatic ballad singer called Nightingale. And Nightingale is entrancing the dupe. And let's see how this goes.
To the tune of Packington's Pounds, sir.
Mm.
My masters and friends and good people draw near, and look to your purses, for that I do say.
Ha ha, this chimes good counsel at first dash.
And though little money in them you do bear, it costs more to get than to lose in a day. You oft had been told, but the young and the old, and bidden beware of the cut purse so bold. Then if you take heed, not free me from the curse, who both give you warning for and the cut purse. Youth, youth, thou hadst better been starved by thy nurse than live to be hanged for cutting a purse.
That again, good ballad man, that again.
Youth, youth, thou hadst better been starved by thy nurse than live to be hanged for cutting a purse.
Now, of course, what happens in the play is that while this is going on, Coates has his purse cut. Because the ballad singer is working with a cut purse. But you will have noticed that this song is the song we've just seen on a ballad. And that tells us that Ben Jonson is either using a known ballad or, perhaps a little more likely, writing a ballad to go in his play and serve this purpose. So that makes Ben Jonson both, he's certainly a ballad promoter, and he is possibly a ballad writer. And the other thing about having a scene like that in the play is that the way a real ballad singer-seller sells the ballad is by getting up and singing and entrancing you with their lovely voice. So the play is doing that and making you, the audience, on one level equal to the dupe, and on another level you're even more equal to the dupe. A, because you have indeed paid money to come to this performance, and B, because you're going to leave this performance so ballad ready, you're going to be super keen to buy this ballad, or another to Packington's Pound, but probably this ballad. So what's going on with Jonson there? Jonson seems to be doing, amongst other complicated things, selling a ballad in this play. Sticking with Jonson, I'm going to move on to Jonson in the rarefied world of masques. So Jonson also wrote masques, and these are more sophisticated than plays. A masque is a poetic work that is set to music and that also has fabulous scenery. And so it's a visual and oral spectacular. It's marvellous, and it's performed usually once only, sometimes twice, always in a very noble place, usually court. So a masque is something that most people wouldn't get to experience, but they'd hear about them and they'd yearn to see a masque. Now, Ben Jonson, in one of his masques, the Masque of Augeas, has this particular ballad. And that's already surprising that Ben Jonson in a masque would locate a rather lower piece of literature like a ballad. Now, this particular masque, what is spectacular about it is that John Urson enters with 3 dancing bears. So he is accompanied by 3 dancing bears. Let's think a little moment about his name, John Urson. Ursus means bear, but John Urson and Ben Jonson are doing weird, interesting things, so that maybe Ben Jonson is also encoding the fact that he has inscribed this ballad in the very title of the ballad. And I can see Dan smiling away, because that was his point. I was going to pretend it was mine, but... so I'll just read the first verse. Though it may seem rude for me to intrude with these my bears by chancer, 'twere sport for a king if they could sing as well as they can dance. So this is setting up the dancing of the dancing bears in front of the king, but in ballad form. Now, that particular ballad turns up in another play by someone else in a rather interesting way. And it's at roughly the same time, very shortly afterwards. In this other play, which is an academic play written for performance at Cambridge, there is a rogue ballad singer called Bidstand. Rogue ballad singer.
Bid me stand.
Yeah, Bidstand. Bidstand is, by the way, thieves' cant for a highwayman. He also works with a cut purse. This is a bit of a knockdown, cheaper version of Bartholomew Fair.
Come, sirs, pence apiece. Here is a new ballad, a dainty new ballad, newly printed and newly come forth, concerning His Majesty's subjects, the bears, and Urson, their reverend instructor.
Run, boys, run! A new ballad!
Though it may seem rude for me to intrude with these my bears by chance, 'twere sport for a king if they could sing as well as they can dance.
Have they any fine pictures I throw at them?
Oh, yes, of 3 dancing bears and Urson.
Now, what this seems to reveal is that there is a literal paper ballad that can be sold that actually has a ballad-specific picture on it of Urson and 3 dancing bears, which is, it's really expensive to have a ballad-specific picture. You usually just stick any old vaguely relevant thing onto it. So this is exciting. It looks as though the ballad from the masque is also circulating as an actual ballad one can buy, and is once again being promoted in a play. So then you think, oh, I'd love to find the actual ballad. And now here's a problem in the world of ballads, is that ballads were super ephemeral. Because they got stuck on walls and things, they tend to have, they were very present at the time, and they have survived over time very badly. So you often can't find a ballad that did exist, and when you do find a ballad, it's often it's not in the first iteration, so dating the text, dating the paper won't date the ballad. So all of that is to say, I wanted to find this ballad in ballad form, and I couldn't. But then something weird came up, and that is this. So this is a book. It's a book called Recreation for Ingenious Headpieces. And it's published in 1645, and it's actually a republication of an earlier book. Now, in this book, it's got this new section in 1645 of songs, a lot of which have pictures. And the rest of the book does not have pictures. So these do not seem to be book-specific pictures. These seem to be a crop of pictures that, that the person putting this book together, the person compiling the book, has come by. And as here we have that very same song, though it may seem rude for me to intrude, etc. And as we really do seem to have a picture of Urson and his 3 dancing bears, so we seem to have the distributed leftovers of that lost ballad, telling us there really was such a ballad, of course. So that, interestingly, and once again, we have the strangeness of Ben Jonson actually being a ballad writer, even when he's being something far, far, far more sophisticated. He's also got some kind of ballad market. Let me make the same point again. So I'll make it quickly. Ben Jonson wrote another masque. It was called For the Honour of Wales. And it was in some ways a homage to Wales, and in some ways a parody of anyone with a hilarious Welsh accent. Here is a song he writes in a hilarious Welsh accent. And as I don't want to insult anyone, I did try to get my brother to rehearse me in how to do a Welsh accent. He does it really well, but mine was coming out sort of a bit mean and also slightly Indian, so I decided to give over. Take it from me that this is in a Welsh accent. And it refers in a way that one might think as delightful or mean to the kind of things that Welsh people wear. A shirkin frieze, a jerkin made of a frieze jerkin, but Welsh. Okay. A frieze jerkin, that's a kind of hairy, woolly jacket, and a Monmouth cap. This was a felt cap made in Monmouth, and Monmouth caps were so kind of hardy and thick, though woolen, that they were at some point issued to everyone in the army. So anyway, this is the clothing of a Welsh person, and this is in Ben Jonson's Honour of Wales. Now that same book I mentioned to you before also has that song, and also has with that song a what may or may not be a ballad-specific picture, but it's a parody Welsh person picture. He wears his Monmouth cap, and he is also notably short, which you can tell when you see how low his sword hangs on his body. So he's short, and he also has the Welsh people were thought to be short but warlike, and that was thought to be sort of kind of charming. And you can see he's got 3 weapons, and that's sort of one too many weapons, so they're going to kind of clash together. Anyway, so this is that song, and again, the suggestion is that this also circulated as a ballad with that picture. And in fact, we do have proof of that, because although it's not until 1700, there is still that ballad being published with that picture. And now, here is John Chamberlain, someone almost as gossipy as myself. And he is writing a letter to a friend. For lack of better news, here is a ballad of Ben Jonson's in the play at the Lord Marquis at Burley. That's the masque, Gypsies Metamorphosed. For which, the ballad, and other good service, he hath his pension from 100 marks increased to £2,000 per annum, besides the reversion of the mastership of the revels. So what he says is, he says he's enclosing a ballad, although that ballad is alas lost. In the very fact of enclosing a ballad, that means that that ballad separately existed on a different piece of paper. It also means that he thinks the friend who wasn't there at the masque would like to have the ballad. You know, what is the friend getting? Like a little piece, a strange kind of moment of the occasion he wasn't at. And this tells us something interesting as well about why you might want a ballad from a masque, that sort of you get to have been there a little bit, and you get to sing something that was sung there. And also this is suggesting that Ben Jonson is going to get loads of money and honour a bit because of the ballad. And that makes us wonder which ballad this was. And actually there are two ballads it might be. One is in the late iteration still of that same book, Recreation for Ingenious Headpieces. And in order to talk about this ballad, I need also to talk about the Duke of Buckingham. So the Duke of Buckingham was the most handsome man in England, it was said. And he was a fantastic dancer. And King James was in love with him and possibly having an affair with him. And so one reason why a ton of masques were coming out at this time is that courtiers could act and dance in the first bit of masques, in the anti-masque. So professionals would take over, but courtiers would do the first bit. And so a load of masques were invented so that handsome Buckingham could strut his stuff in front of the king. So one of the ballads in here is sung by the captain, and we know the captain was Buckingham. And that means we've probably got a kind of unrecognised or semi-recognised picture of Buckingham here leading the gypsies. And the reason why I think this is really, really specific to that occasion is that if you look at the 6 gypsies, who are in fact courtiers in disguise, but gypsy second along at the top, the middle gypsy, has her hand poking in the wrong direction. So that seems like amateur courtiers kind of dancing a bit wrong. Led by Buckingham doing a muscular, lovely dance. Buckingham, this masque was celebrating the fact that Buckingham had just got married, and he'd married into the Manners family, and they owned a lot of property in Derby. So this masque is also full of Derby references. And I'm not going to say very much here because there are mothers present. But this is about this particular song deals with a cave in Derby, which is now called the Peak Cavern or something like that. Anyway, it was at this point called the Devil's Arse. This is a song about it. And it's probably encoding Buckingham's sexuality amongst other things in it. So this is one of the ballads, and this also might tell us why people would be keen to have that ballad, because if you have this ballad, you're also in on court gossip and court jokes. And if you sing the ballad, you're a little bit Buckingham, the handsomest man in England. Alternatively, here's another ballad which still exists in ballad form, also from that same masque. This is The Devil's Entertainment. And Cook Laurel, or Cock Laurel, again, there's some encoding going on here, invites the devil to a banquet on the Peak in Derbyshire, though here it says Devonshire, but Derbyshire, and the devil then eats annoying people, like lawyers. So this was also a very popular ballad at the time. So either of these ballads might have been the enclosure. So all of this is really weirdly interesting both about Ben Jonson's strange relationship to ballads, but more widely about everyone's strange relationship to ballads, that they are very compelled by them, and that ballads have a strange position that flops between high and low literature. I know you'll be yearning to see him, so here is the handsomest man in England displaying his fabulous legs. And as you can see, he's got his garter just there, just to draw the eye to the slender thighs, etc. And here he is again, in the shortest of breeches, with his amazing garter, and here he is again. So you get the idea. And you can maybe see why the king was so besotted. we even have a moment recorded from a masque danced in front of the king. An ambassador was there, and he wrote a letter in Italian, which is here translated. The king, who is by nature choleric, grew impatient because the masque was slow to begin, and shouted loudly, "Why don't they dance? Devil take all of you, dance!" At once, the Marquis of Buckingham, His Majesty's favourite minion, danced a number of very high and very tiny capers with such grace and lightness that he made everyone admire and love him. The king then honoured the Marquis with extraordinary signs of affection, touching his face. So I think we're getting a sense of what masques were like in this period. But as I say, this is a lesser-known Buckingham picture, and that even makes me wonder whether this might be a Buckingham picture. That's Urson. Either it's another Buckingham picture, although the legs are a little sturdy, but this is not the finest art. If it isn't another Buckingham picture, it's the same illustrator who can only do dances one way. I think that is equally possible. If that is the case, then that does in fact tell us that Ben Jonson has a pet illustrator, and that really shows who is making ballad-specific pictures for him. And that really shows a strange and close connection between Ben Jonson and the publication, the creation and publication of ballads for ballad sale. And that raises some questions about who is bringing that about. Like, is the court paying for it? Or is Ben Jonson paying for it? Who is doing this? And who is profiting when those particular texts break off from the rest of the text, and when one genre gives way to another genre in this very strange way? And I think the other thing we have to bear in mind is this, that if you are going to feature a ballad and it needs to be printed by the time you perform so that it can be really sold, so that you can give someone a need to buy it and then the ability to buy it, then you've got to write the ballad fairly early on in the process of writing your play. In fact, maybe you've got to write the ballad first so that it can be being printed while you write the rest of the play, which then means that plays and masques might at their root be ballads in some odd way, and that they might become other genres later, but with this genre at the core of them. That also means something very strange about how there's a bit that they start in print and then they become only performance later. So there's something really compelling, and you can see why I'm very interested in this, quite apart from the beauty of Buckingham. That is enough of Ben Jonson. I'm now going to move on to Shakespeare, because now we see that Ben Jonson has some kind of incredibly close connection with ballads and ballad printing. Then, of course, we wonder whether that is the same with Shakespeare. With Shakespeare, it's a slightly different story. So I'm going to start with a book, and it's an awkward book to deal with. It's called The Passionate Pilgrim, and it is said to be by W. Shakespeare. But the problem with this book is that a lot of the poems in it are not, in fact, by Shakespeare. They're by people like Barnfield. So Shakespeare himself did not put this collection together, clearly. In fact, he seems to have been annoyed by it. And that means one has to be wary of making any conclusions about its contents. I will now do just that. So here, we're reading our way through The Passionate Pilgrim. We've got through about 2/3 of it when we get an internal second title page called Sonnets to Sundry Sorts of Music. Sonnets was a word used more vaguely then than now and tended just to mean poems. So this seems to be musical poems, or lyrics. We'd call it lyrics. And here is one of those lyrics, and I'm going to read, it goes on for a second page, but I'll just read a bit of it. Live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove that hills and valleys, dales and fields, and all the craggy mountains yield. There will we sit upon the rocks and see the shepherds feed their flocks by shallow rivers, by whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. There will I make thee a bed of roses with 1,000 fragrant posies. I'm not going to go on. It's a very passionate poem. It's gorgeous, it's highly wrought. It's about a sort of pastoral idyll, and it's about a world in which the environment reflect and become part of the love. Okay, so now a lot of you will be familiar with this poem, and you will be familiar with it as a poem by Christopher Marlowe. But just to say that it was first published as a song by Shakespeare. And it was also very swiftly released as a ballad. And if we look at this ballad, you'll see it's called A Most Excellent Ditty of the Lover's Promises to His Beloved. And you'll see that it's to a sweet new tune called Live With Me and Be My Love. So we were talking about expensive ballad-specific pictures. This is a ballad-specific tune, a tune written for this. And that shows, now a ballad-specific tune is an amazing thing. It's incredibly exciting because it adds to your tune repertoire. But you're actually going to have to hang around by the ballad seller until you learn that tune. I wonder if you can help us.
Live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove that valleys, groves, hills and fields, woods or steepy mountains yields, that valleys, groves, hills and fields, woods or steepy mountains yields.
Thank you. So one thing I think we can conclude is this is a ballad, that we're wrong to think of it as only a poem. Authorship is unclear, but let me show you something quite odd, because it's happening just before this ballad is printed, but just after the book is printed. And that is Shakespeare's Merry Wives of Windsor. Now, in Merry Wives, there is a comedy Welsh person, and as I've already told you, I can't really do the accent. This is Sir Hugh Evans, and he's in a state because he thinks he's got himself into a duel. And so he's terribly worried, and he tries to bolster himself, give himself courage by singing. But as he's also foolish, he sings love songs instead of martial songs and makes himself even more sad. Jesu bless me, how my heart throbs and throbs. And then she made him beds of roses and 1,000 fragrant posies, 2 shallow rivers. Now God judge me, my heart swells more and more. Methinks I can cry. Okay, so there we have that, a little more of that verse as a song inside Shakespeare's play. Is that because he owns it, or is he promoting it? Either way, there it is, certainly as a song and certainly in Shakespeare. So I say no more, but move on to another example. This is a really weird one. Here is a ballad which survives in ballad form, and is called A Lover's Complaint. Interestingly, the same title as a Shakespeare poem, which is at the end of the Sonnets. This Lover's Complaint, which is, you'll notice, to a pleasant new tune, so you're also going to have to learn that from the ballad singer seller. A Lover's Complaint is about a desperately sad man. Sad because he is in love, but she doesn't love him. I wonder how that sounds.
A poor soul sat sighing by a sycamore tree. Sing, willow, 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 with his hand on his bosom, his head on his knee. Oh, willow, willow,
songs we've been hearing in our possibly Shakespeare bit are a great deal more soulful than the songs we've been hearing in our Ben Jonson bit. This also is a song where the environment echoes and becomes part of the mood, here extreme melancholy. This poor soul is under a sycamore tree, sick amour, sick of love. And the chorus is willow, obviously, because of the weeping willow. And let me stress again, this is a very, very sad man. This becomes relevant in a second. Here is Othello, only in folio. The quarto does not have the song, possibly because Desdemona's voice broke. However, in Othello, there is a moment where Desdemona, very sad, because Othello doesn't love her anymore, but she doesn't know why, and she is having an intimate discussion with her maid Emilia as she gets ready for bed. So this is a girl scene, two women talking. And Desdemona says this: "My mother had a maid called Barbary. She was in love, and he she loved proved mad and did forsake her. She had a song of willow." Let's just look at that setup a little bit. Desdemona remembers back in time to the time of her mother. So this is a song that crosses time. It's an old song. The mother had a maid. So this is also a song that crosses class from mother to maid, and Desdemona is also talking to her maid. And the maid was called Barbary. Sometimes people wonder if that's short for Barbara, but that's not a usual shortened term for Barbara. It is probably that the maid is from Barbary and is therefore a black maid, which means that this is a song which also crosses races. So this is a song true of all women, over all time, over all classes, over all races, and that's that they get really, really sad because men are awful. She then starts to sing that song of ultimate female sorrow. I'm not going to risk it myself. But the poor soul sat singing by a sycamore tree, sing all a green willow, her hand on her bosom, her head on her knee, sing willow, willow, willow. So it's the willow song, but with the gender changed. That's quite an odd thing to do. And the other thing that is odd is she sings really far through the song, and you've heard how long a verse took. She is, in the most melancholy way, really highly promoting this song. She's like a really dismal ballad seller. So she sings really far through the song, right? And there's a sense in which, so one question is, you know the chorus, the willow chorus, particularly after this number of iterations. You will mentally join in. Might you in fact join in? Do you take part in Desdemona's sorrow? The other thing is, if you know it already as a man song, do you get Othello's sorrow also weirdly to the side of this song? Do you actually get male sorrow because it's a man song? And that depends, of course, whether you already know the ballad or whether this is teaching you the ballad. But whatever is the case, this bit of text seems to imagine that you can know the ballad very well and very far through its verses, because something happens here where she's singing, "Let nobody blame him, his scorn I approve." And then she corrects herself, "Nay, that's not next." Now, it's weird that the text should do that, because in saying, "Nay, that's not next," it asks you to think about what is next. Otherwise, why does it say that? Now, if we cross-reference then to the man ballad, let me just show you what is next, which is never spoken or sung. "Let nobody blame me. Her scorn I do prove. She was born to be fair, and I die for her love." Now, Desdemona will, in fact, die. This is like a spoiler. And if you know the ballad, you've got a sort of a creepy proleptic moment here of what's going to happen. But you have to know the ballad so well. How could you possibly know it that well? Well, you could know it that well if you've just bought it, say, if maybe it's in your hand. So somehow, Shakespeare is certainly promoting ballads. It's a little less clear that he's writing them, but he's maybe writing them. Or maybe that's not quite the right question, because ballads are, as you've seen, they're a collaborative art form. I think you can write a bit and someone can write the rest, you know. So, but there's something very interesting going on with this high promotion of this particular ballad. And let's see Shakespeare really promoting not just a ballad, but its printer. This is a bit in The Tempest. Stephano and Trinculo are drunk, and they've been singing, but drunkenly, so not super well. And Caliban is a bit appalled, he's very musical, by them. That's not the tune. Ariel then enters, but Ariel is invisible to everyone in the play except Prospero. So Ariel enters, we the audience can see him, but the people on stage cannot see him. Ariel enters and plays the tune correctly on a tabor and pipe. Stephano, what is this same? Trinculo, this is the tune of our catch, played by the picture of nobody. Now, he doesn't say it's played by nobody. He says it's played by the picture of nobody. And that's quite a loaded statement. Because now let me introduce you to the picture of nobody. Here is the play of Nobody and Somebody, featuring the picture of nobody. Nobody, hilariously, has no body. He has only breeches that go up to his neck. This is a sort of one-joke play. That is the joke. But everyone totally loved this picture. So much so that John Trundle, the printer, let me blow this up, printed for John Trundle and are to be sold at his shop in the Barbican at the sign of nobody. He made it his shop sign. Okay, so John Trundle is nobody in print terms. You go for him for the play of Nobody and Somebody, or you can just buy the picture of nobody and not have to get the play. And John Trundle was also a big publisher of ballads. And Nobody was a big character also in the ballad world. So here is a ballad which is Nobody his counsel to choose a wife, or the difference between widows and maids. This is a ballad for those of you who are wondering, should I marry a widow or should I marry a maid? And Nobody explains to you that you think you want to marry a maid because she's so beautiful and young. But actually, a widow is richer and more sexually experienced and is probably a better bet. And here is a picture of Nobody with the ideal wife who has no body but a skirt that goes up to her neck on this ballad. So to go back to Shakespeare, when it says that the tune is by the picture of nobody, it does also say that if you want that ballad, John Trundle is marketing it. So that's an amazing thing, because this is Shakespeare who never mentions printers in the world of playwriting, who seems to be promoting a ballad sale. And let's hop over time and see how weirdly music was remembered for Shakespeare plays, even when it's lost to us now. So I'll give you a very weird example. I'm going to start with a Shakespeare play, which is 2 Henry IV. Oh, there was a lovely popping sound. Did you hear it? And don't worry, we're getting near the end. So we get, these are drawers in 2 Henry IV. See if thou canst find out sneak's noise. A noise is a rather derogatory term for a set of musicians. I'll see if I can find out sneak. Then we get enter music, so presumably sneak's noise. Enter music. The music is come, sir. Falstaff. Let them play. Play, sirs. Sit on my knee, doll. Okay, so that's a moment in Shakespeare's play. And we don't know any more about sneak, and we don't know about the music here. And now I'm going to hop 20 odd years later and to Cape Verde, or Verde, I don't actually know how to say it. So we're very far away from here, and this is written by a man who's on his way to Barbados. He stops in Cape Verde, and this happens. And he's here in about 1647, though it's not published till 1657. So there he is. In comes an old fellow, a lute in his hand, and played us for a novelty the Passam says Galliard, a tune in great esteem in Harry the Fourth's days. For when Sir John Falstaff makes his amours to Mistress Doll Tearsheet, Sneak and his company, the admired fiddlers of that age, plays this tune. So here extraordinarily, what's particularly weird is that this man thinks that's what happened actually in Henry IV's time, and he's muddled up seeing the play with reading history. But what is also interesting is he names the tune, which he thoroughly associates with 2 Henry IV. And what's even more extraordinary is that tune from 2 Henry IV has circulated round the world such that it's got there. It's a very extraordinary story. I mean, he says, what a long time this tune had in sailing from England to this place. And he's rather scornful that they think it's a new tune when it's such an old tune. But actually, this is an amazing insight into the way music travels better than plays travel. And of course, music travels better because music doesn't need language in the way plays do. But that also shows another great thing about ballads or any kind of music is that your play might be stuck in your theatre, but your ballad can go everywhere. Now, you'll all have been wondering why I've been talking so much about Shakespeare and ballads, and I haven't featured the main ballad singer in Shakespeare, who is Autolycus. But do not worry, I am about to do so. Before I do so, I will just remind you, a couple of things. One is that ballads, like, as I say, the Willow Song, can go in and out of plays more quickly than text does. They're less rooted to a play. And they can also be easily switched as relevant to a particular occasion. And let me remind you also that today is the birthday of Ali Grimley. And now, I've made the most minor adjustment, I don't know if you'll spot it, to this Shakespeare play. Okay. What hast here? Ballads? Pray now, buy some. I love a ballad in print.
Why, this is a passing merry one, and goes to the tune of Happy Birthday to You.
We can both sing it. We had that tune on it a month ago.
A month? Well, I can bear my part. You must know 'tis my occupation. Have at it with you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ali. Happy birthday to you. She's at the back waving. This has also given us a chance to see how communal ballads are and how they invite you into the performative world, so you're not just sitting there. Another thing that's great about them. Very speedily, I will get to my third, and as I already told you before, briefest part, which is about the relationship of ballads to theatres more generally. Because we've seen playwrights writing ballads, promoting ballads in such a way that we're starting to think, well, they must be being marketed somewhere around theatres. How does that work? How does it work selling a different kind of literature in a theatre. So let's think very briefly about the business of marketing ballads in theatres. Here is a reference which helps us know where ballad singers were with respect to theatres. It's a reference to this unsufferable loitering quality in singing of ballads and songs at the doors of such houses where plays are used. So it's the door. And that's interesting because it's just outside the theatre. This is not within the theatrical precinct. Thou'lt be a ballad monger. I shall live to see thee stand in a playhouse door with thy long box. So once again, so what's really interesting is these ballads are outside the world of the play, but only just. They're at the very, very door just before you get in. And actually there's a practical reason why a ballad singer-seller might be at the door of a theatre. And that is, I couldn't find a picture of people queuing to get into an early modern theatre, but this is people queuing to get onto the ice when the Thames was frozen. What I really wanted to show was a great big queue. Basically, outside the theatre, there would be a queue of people. That queue gets bored, gets restless. It's really good to have a ballad singer-seller there because it will entertain the crowd. It can seed some songs or tunes that are relevant to the play if they're working in tandem with the theatre. And also, this works for the ballad singer-sellers, obviously, because they make good sales. Similarly, if they're there when you're queuing to get out of the theatre, now you might be even more ballad ready because the play has teed you up to want some ballads. And then there they are. So then the question is, well, two things. One is, was the theatre running this concession or allowing this concession? Or were the playwrights themselves setting up independent arrangements with ballad singer-sellers? And I haven't quite worked out what the relationship is. It is clearly a close and profitable relationship, whatever it is, because it also might be being generated by the ballad singer-sellers themselves. Yes, so the question is, do they manage concessions? Does the theatre manage these concessions or not? But another question is, well, if these ballad singer-sellers are there before the play and after the play, then the play is sort of framed by ballads. Even if there isn't a ballad in it, it's framed by ballads. So should we rethink our geographical perimeters, but also our intellectual perimeters of what a play is? Because does it begin that bit beforehand at its doors with a song? And does it end in a song? And do plays, which I've already said, if they contain ballads, maybe are written first as ballads, are plays always kind of heralded or bracketed by the ballad world? So that's the question about the strange geography of ballads. And the other thing is the nature of the ballad singer-sellers themselves. They are often described, they're poor, and they are often described as being disabled in some way. So here's a reference to the noseless ballad woman. To hear the noseless ballad woman raise her snuffling throat. Here, write some ballads for blind David and his boy. Stanzas which halt and hobble as lamely as that one-legged cantor that sings them. So we're having, as our ballad singer-sellers, kind of outsider people. They're outside the precinct, and they're also the opposite, maybe, of the lovely men who'll be inside the theatre acting. But they're also the reality of what the men will pretend to be. And they are also performers, of course, and they're also selling performance, and they're also selling print. And they can be women, even though actors can only be men. So there's one way in which you can see them as sort of poor and second rate. And there's another way in which you can see them as the real thing, against which the play might be a bit of a disappointment. Here is a ballad singer-seller. He's come with his own stool. I think you might often do this. That gives you a bit of height, as this plinth has for us. for singing his ballads. So you can see his poor and his kind of ugly. Here's another one, also poor, and there might be some ethnic essentializing going on here. The thing about ballad singer sellers is you're going to stare at them. So if you have qualities that make you be stared at, this is not a bad job for you to have in a cruel world. So I think so also people who dressed unusually were from exciting countries, various other things. These people would also become ballad singer sellers. Women would also, or you could just be a charismatic guy, but of course this is not a real ballad singer seller. This is one in a mask, so he'll be performed by a courtier. Maybe more real is this one on a ballad called "Few Words Are Best," and I will take that to heart. Come buy this new ballad before you do go. If you rail at the author, I know what I know. And then we have a picture of a ballad singer-seller who is old and poor and has a stick. He's maybe lame. And there we have a lovely, wealthy young gentleman keenly buying the ballad because, as I've said, they cross classes. And indeed, the ballads that survive are often in very grand collections. Pepys collected them, John Selden collected them. So people would collect ballads a bit like collecting stamps. So anyway, so I'm more or less at the end, but before I finally finish, because of the strangeness of ballads, I just want to turn that talk on its head. So I've given an entire talk, because I'm here at the Shakespeare Institute and we work on plays. I've given the talk as though the play is the core work of art, and as though the ballad is what we sometimes call a paratext, an attendant text. And I certainly think as an editor that we should publish complete ballads with our plays. I certainly think that's the case. But if a ballad is a play's paratext, then a play is a ballad's paratext. And in some ways we've seen that ballads are kind of deeper and more important than plays, and that ballads, more people can purchase them, more people can sing them, they can travel further, they get into houses, they go across the world. They are receptive to people of all colours and all abilities and disabilities. So there's something universalizing and kind of wonderful about ballads, which in a way shows up the brilliant limitations of the play world. And I will end there. I have discovered this ballad which I wanted to reveal to you here, but we have already sung it. And I just wanted, here's a cast list. And thank you everyone, thank you very much.